support my tongue. You will never be the same.
And with the full catastrophe, he didn't mean it was all bad.
God that I worship has a way of saying, don't play with me.
I invite you to the dance with the Lord of the dance.
God didn't call America to do what she's doing in the world now.
Please dance.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the second episode of our two-part episode of Remote Pastoral Care. Yeah, I know we did another two-parter. It's great. As you may have noticed, this is a little tag intro here because we kind of cut off in the middle of the conversation because our conversation was too long to be one episode. So I want to thank you for joining us again, and I'm going to go ahead and crossfade to the rest of the conversation. Enjoy.
Yeah, can we take a second? I think I've noticed a thought I had coming into this conversation, knowing all the participants and hearing what we've talked about so far, and now talking about systemic ills in the church. Take a minute to talk about the harm more than benefit that Christian schools do.
Oh, God, those damn things.
Because we've all been there, I think, at some point or another. Like, my faith got weaker at Hope College.
I wasn't there for long enough. So
Okay.
Well, we
Fair
were
enough.
at Hope, if you recall correctly. At one point, I said, fuck the church, declared myself pope of a new religion, and tried to start some shit. So I
Yeah.
get it. I get it.
We were a perpetual boat rocker. I just stopped bothering myself. And obviously, if Jay was studying to be a pastor, there was a Christian school behind that. So
Yeah, I mean, that's what eventually led me to a decade of agnosticism, was people within that church, within the Christian college I went to. I mean, there were people that I met there that had been in Christian school since they were in preschool. They had never been in a public school setting whatsoever. They had barely interacted with anyone outside of the church. And so they're in this bubble that they have no idea of what the outside world is like. They have no idea what anyone is like who is not a Christian, and they study to be a pastor or a Lutheran school teacher. So they just stay inside that bubble their entire lives and have no idea how to interact with the world. And I think that's really harmful. You have to know how to interact with people who are not part of the church in order to bring people into the church. Otherwise, you're just staying in that clique. And from what I've seen from my parents' church, the more cliquey you are, the sooner the church will die off in the long run.
I'll say,
absolutely.
from an anthropological standpoint, I guess you could say, that kind of baffles me too, because it's the church we hold up as one of our greatest non-Jesus heroes, the Apostle Paul, whose whole thing was literally being all things to all people, like going elsewhere, meeting different people, being in different environments, none of which were Christian in as much as the term could be applied in those days. So that's a tension I've never grasped. It's like we can idolize Paul, which again, that in and of itself is problematic. But if you're going to do that, like, you can't turn around and say that, okay, keeping our isolated communities is a good idea, because that's the opposite of what he was saying.
I mean, there's cherry picking without even looking at scripture. There's just cherry picking the ideas and concepts, which happens all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I'm going to go back to the like harm schools cause. I mean, Don, you and I, having spent 4 years at Hope College, I think both of our faiths were in the dumpster by the end of the journey. And like you recall, like while we were there, it felt like being in like fucking high school.
Or worse.
I mean, or worse all the time. Like, the football players beat up a gay student in the 4 years we were there. There was a professor of world religions who basically was forced into resigning because he called out a prolific donor for using the Bible to foment hate.
Mm-hmm.
There was so much. There's a lot to unpack with that journey as well. And I don't, it's like, how beneficial was, I mean, the education was fine. Like, I'm appreciative of my degree. I was a good chemistry school. I mean, I'm doing sciences. And the Japanese degree was great.
Yeah, the Japanese, it wasn't what I started out for, but I will say you are quite correct that not only did I get a good Japanese degree out of it, but I also connected with a professor who has gone on to be one of my best colleagues and friends, and I still see every day, just about. But that is an important feature to note, is that there are pieces from these experiences that can be taken away. It is easy for us, particularly when we're dealing with the great evils we're talking about, to say that this thing is entirely evil. There's always going to be some good thing we can take away from that, and some piece of the divine, even in the most evil situations. So it is important to note that.
Well, to borrow a piece of pro wrestling parlance, there's something to be said for God of all entities being able to turn chicken shit into chicken salad, like pull something good out of a crap situation. Like Don, Steve, I wouldn't know you guys if I hadn't made the god awful life choice to try going to Hope College. So I don't think that that's a credit to Hope College as an institution.
No, not at all.
I think that would be a little misguided to suggest, is all I'm saying.
But it is a credit to how God works in those situations. That being said, I've always asked, what is the point of having, like, whether you want to look at it from a cynical structural position or from a faith-based position or what is the point of having Christian-specific educational institutions? What are we trying to accomplish with that? That can't be accomplished with public or secular institutions.
I don't think they're a good idea in general. I think it's a method of control. Well, and again, this isn't to like universally hate on, every Christian school either. Like, the only one I went to was in college. I didn't go to like a Christian grade school or whatever. There have to be people, just sheer numbers. There have to be people that really valued the experience, and not because of the, bonus indoctrination points. But it does seem like control and indoctrination, and like you can have your basic factual education and your spiritual guidance separately. It seems like that would be good for both of those things.
You have that stereotype too of the Catholic school kid going like crazy with freedom.
Yes, especially with women, like with girls who have been like in a parochial school. I mean, it's even Aerosmith video, like that is very much like a thing. Like when you're sheltered your entire life like that, and you're brought up to believe a certain way like that your entire life, and then you get hit with, like, let's say after you go to, like for me, I didn't go to a school that was parochial by any means growing up. I went to a public school, but I also, had this like 2-3 times a week until I was pretty much 18, being a part of the church. But then most of those kids have to go to college, and they end up choosing a liberal arts school. And that is a huge culture shock. Having that kind of freedom and the ability to go, wait, what a second? Like, how can I navigate this kind of openness, this kind of freedom, this kind of, everything that you do is no longer under a microscope by your parents and by the church. And
which shouldn't have been doing that in the first place, by the way, but do continue.
Exactly. But then they tend to go a little overboard.
Mm-hmm.
As anyone would when they're just finally handed freedom.
Yeah. And there's a reason why that particular type of Catholic school girl shows up as a trope in certain types of popular televisual media that are found on websites ending in hub.
Yes, thank you.
But that does drive home a particular point, which is the restrictive nature of these educational systems from the beginning. And one thing that's been running through my head as we've been talking about this is a theory that I've heard a couple of times before, that every negative thing is just a perversion of a positive thing. And so I look at these Christian school environments and what they're doing, and I try to ask myself the question, what positive thing are they trying to do so badly that they're maliciously creating a negative thing instead. And the word that keeps coming back to me that they're trying to do is to build community. If I were to look at the idea of creating a Christian education system from my perspective, I would be doing it in order to create a community where everyone is welcome, where everyone can learn together without a lot of the social pressures that God knows everyone here has run into from time to time. Admittedly, those social pressures are as much from the church these days as not, but you get the idea. The idea would be to create community, to create fellowship, to create friendship, build bonds between people so that nobody is alone in their formative years. Now, is the church actually doing that? Hell no. Like, let me go ahead and lay that one down there. I can say with some certainty that that was at some point the intent behind this. It isn't what's happening here, and I think that's key. But yeah, that's the theory I'm knocking around on this anyway. I can't claim to be correct on that or anything ever really.
I think you're actually incredibly 100% right. And the culture that creates ends up snaking its way into not just religion, but also laws and societal norms and all sorts of other things that, even though it may not be like explicitly written down, like this is only one aspect of your life, like Christianity kind of thing, it's become all of your life now. Like, for example, like right now in the United States, we're having difficulty with, well, we are always having difficulty with things that have anything to do with gender identity, always. But that also includes the issues that we've been having for generations when it comes to just women having rights and bodily autonomy. Like, we are not getting anywhere. And it's constantly like beating your head against a wall going, how do we fix this? How do we change this? How do we open people's minds to the concept that what they were raised with or what they consider is Christianity? Number one, there's a separation of church and state that should never involve each other to begin with. But now we've got this like constant pressure every single day of new laws, new bills, new things that are inhibiting the LGBTQIA plus community. And it's so difficult.
I think that maybe does go back to just the whole Christian schooling education thing. Like, and I can already hear people being like, you're saying people aren't allowed to teach their kids religion. No, I'm not fucking saying that. I'm saying do it on your own time and like or set up a separate school. They can go to Christian classes after school, like going to football practice or ballet or whatever the hell. But the basis of education that we give to our young people is the basis of our future society. This is a roundabout way of going with the, children are our future crap, but I mean, it's true. Like, and the nuttier hardline conservatives and stuff know this too, because they complain about people coming back from college liberal. It's like, sometimes the facts have a liberal bent to them. Like, what you put into people who are learning to be a society is going to build what the society is. So if we're mixing religion into our like basic factual education system, is it any wonder that it gets mixed into other stuff later on down the line, like the law, and that it's not supposed to be?
Well, I want to touch on something you said a little bit earlier about our education being the basis for making a society, and I'm going to say something blunt and inflammatory here. I know that's surprising coming from me, but I don't actually believe that Christian education is a problem for society. I think, and this is going to be shocking, I think that all education should and could be Christian education, because Christian education is all about not pushing your own goddamn beliefs on people, listening to other people, building into relationship and fellowship with other people, understanding the world, sharing love with you and your neighbor. It's evangelical beliefs, and I make this distinction here, that are terrible for society and terrible for educating people. And I think that's a distinction we don't often make.
I feel like I kind of got to fight you on this one a little bit, just because like the idea of being welcoming and inclusive and like these are definitely things that Jesus taught and that should be a foundational cornerstone of the Christian faith. But I would argue those things are hardly exclusive to Christianity, and that those concepts can exist outside of a religious environment.
Well, that's exactly my point, though. We're talking about Christian education, that is education done in a Christian way, which would be according to these same principles that are also existent in other environments. It wouldn't be necessarily distinct from that. I'm not talking about educating people about Christianity, which has no place in our school system, because that's not what schools are for.
It just feels like it starts falling into a words mean things trap, you know?
I mean, exactly at that point. Yeah, I suppose you're right. But in the end,
Christian education just it does have an extant definition in our language and our society. So, I mean, the point you're making is valid. The words that we're discussing are being used for something already. So
yeah, and they ought not to be, and it pisses me off. But then again, what am I, if nothing but a pedant and a linguist?
And can we also be honest here that everyone has like the right, the right to religion and to practice it.
Yeah.
And that includes doing a school system. But that's where we kind of muddy the water here, because not all Christians believe the same things. Not all, Muslims believe the same things. Not all Jews believe the same things. And when you start getting down to it, there are certain people that are going to pervert things and teach their children certain things, or allow them to not be taught certain things. Like, for example, basic healthcare and sex education. Like, that is something that should be taught no matter what religion you are. You should have access to that information, especially should be covering, if you're gay or trans or intersex or any of those variations, that should be taught as well, because it's important that everybody has access to protecting themselves. But for the longest time now, it seems like Christianity does this very weird thing with education where it's like, oh, well, either the dinosaurs never existed or they also existed with man, which goes completely against science, or they completely, do not talk about sex unless it's within bounds of a heterosexual marriage, or they really try to completely just break apart certain things, and then children are left behind not knowing the answers to things that they need to know.
If you don't know the name for something, though, then it can't be part of you. If you've never heard gay, you can't be gay, right?
Exactly. Or somehow, all gays are pedophiles, or somehow, like whatever else comes up. It's whatever the myth is.
So setting aside the problems we have with gay equals pedophile as it relates to biblical translation over the last couple hundred years, setting that piece aside for a minute.
Yeah, which is amazing.
A whole nother day's conversation. I want to ask Jay a little bit to weigh in on some of this, because you've been so quiet listening to the rest of us rant here for a bit, but I really want to get your take on this too, because of your background interacting with Christian education, because I'm very interested in this path that you've taken, where you were set on being a pastor until you ran into the barrier between what the, forgive me for saying stupid ass Missouri Synod had in mind versus who you are as a person. I don't hold the Missouri Synod in particularly high regard, as you may have noticed. And that's, no disrespect intended to the Missouri Synod, except for all the disrespect I intend. But weighing your experience into the mix, how do you approach and view some of this stuff? Like, how do you take this interplay between faith and education, and the difference between faith and using faith as an excuse to teach objectively stupid things?
I think it's important to not just look at the education people are getting in schools, but also the education people are getting at home. I was raised in public schools, but my entire home life was centered around Christianity. Like I said, I listened to exclusively Christian music, and I wore shirts that had Christian sayings on them. And it was really my parents reinforcing what the church was teaching me about homosexuality. My husband actually went to Catholic school all the way from elementary school up through high school, but his mother is a lesbian. His stepmom's daughter is bisexual. So the education he was getting at home was much more inclusive than what the school was giving him. So when he had questions about what the school was teaching him, his parents would tell him, yes, this is what, the Catholic Church is teaching us, but this is what we believe on this matter. So it all goes back to people's home life and what is being reinforced at home. I also knew people who grew up in the public school and believed that dinosaur bones were put in the ground by Satan to trick Christians. So
Yeah, I've heard that one too.
Oh, that one drives me nuts. But
John went full face palm on that one.
yeah. Oh God, I can't tell you how many arguments I have had with people since my early days in the public school system, both in school and in church. Like, no, that's stupid. You're wrong. For God's sake, we can figure this out. It's not hard. And it doesn't conflict with your Bible because, hey, you can't have a day if there's no sun and moon. Anyway, I want to highlight something that you mentioned there in your experience that I think is an important piece that all of us share, that I don't know that we would necessarily at first think to highlight as important, but I think as someone with a background in education may be at the root of what points people in the right direction. And that is what you could call intellectual tension. And that's, you're in the public school system, you've got an inclusive home life, you've got a less than inclusive church scenario, and you're balanced between all three of those perspectives. Now, I think all of us here lived in that tension to one degree or another. We know a lot of people who rejected the tension, picked a side and rolled with it, but a lot of us here, I think we lived in that tension. We were pulled in multiple directions at once. And in the end, it got us to where I think we were supposed to be, but it was a rough ride. I wonder if there isn't a way to turn education into a way of appropriately living in that space of tension, to teach people how to contrast and to understand and to believe and to learn, rather than simply, yanking on them like a medieval torture device until they either break or learn. What do you guys think?
I think persistence is really important. When I first came out to my mom, she's the one who sent me to counseling. She told me if I ever brought a guy home that she'd kick me out of the house. But through showing her throughout the years, that I'm still the same person, that I'm still a good person, it doesn't matter what my sexuality is, and then eventually meeting the person who would become my husband and seeing that you could be gay and Christian, she eventually came around. She attended my wedding, and she has me and my husband over all the time. So I think persistence is really important in trying to re-educate people on the things that they have correctly learned.
And you identify something there that I think is important to these conversations, which is change and growth in individuals other than ourselves. Like, it's easy to see the places where we've grown, where we've changed. I don't know if you gathered by all of my outdated references, but I grew up as a super conservative Christian with, the horribly anachronistic youth pastor and all that. That's baked into my identity, the toxic masculinity and homosexuality, hating, horrible, crispy Christian. I started there. And I haven't, as much as I wish to say I haven't let all of that go. It's still, color is part of who I am and how I interact with the world. But it's easy for me to look back and see how I've grown, and then in turn to look forward and see how much growth there is to do. But it's also, when we're in that place, it's hard for us to look at other people and see them as equally nuanced characters in the story. To see them, it's really particularly the people who hurt us, to look at them and say, they're a bad person. They're always going to be a bad person, and I don't want to be with that bad person ever again. And I am touched and impressed by the way you highlighted that journey there, Jay, is that you identify the change that other people are capable of and how we need to nurture and respect that. And that, in many ways, for a lot of us, I think is the hardest part of the journey, to recognize the divinity in the evil other. What do you guys think on that?
I have a thought about it. I was listening to Jay's story. There's definitely some element of, I would almost call it exposure therapy. You've been seeing the person, seeing how Jay changes in Jay over time from his mom and vice versa. You're around the person. We're in a very digital era now, so a lot of our interactions aren't like that. And
yes,
we jump into this. We put ourselves out there. If an LGBT person puts themselves out there, and then they get like smacked with the clobber verses, I will be right there to tell that person why they're not right. But you don't win people over like that. That's not exposure therapy, but that's still injustice, and something should be done. And it causes people to recede farther into their hole, which is usually the outcome. So I mean, when you're meeting in person, you can't pick your family, or you can pick your friends, but if they're valued friends, they'll stick with you as well. So like that's like, what do we do? I understand, that's kind of my thought. Like, where do we go when you're dealing with, especially in the online sphere? Everyone wants to like break out Corinthians or Leviticus or whatever, and they're all wrong for obvious reasons. But
yeah, and you're right, I think, to identify that the digital realm throws a new complication into that. It's one thing to be able to grow together and change together when you're in an in-person community, but in this online world, it's not happening. My theory, of course, is the one we're living out now, which is to try and build islands of accepting community and grow them and invite more people to join, and hope that it eventually turns into a continent, and however that should go. But I don't know that there is a good solution yet for how to address that. I don't know what you guys think, but I regret to say I have yet to find a way of answering that digital problem that is either effective or sensical.
Yeah, I think anybody with a little bit of knowledge, or friends, family, or who are LGBT and Christian, probably have done at least a little bit of due diligence, or ask somebody in the know to figure out what the clobber verses mean, so they can chime in when they're being used inappropriately. But my experience, when I'm the person piping up about this is wrong, this is why this is wrong, you need to be more accepting and be more Christ-like, it never accomplishes anything. Like, I'm not changing anybody's mind. Like, they slink off and go back into their cave.
All right. Now I'm gonna set up the T-ball for you here, Jay. So get ready for this one. I know this one's gonna give you something here. This is something we identify quite rightly online, is that people are assholes online. But over the last probably 10 years or so, I've noticed, I don't know if you guys have as well, that this persona that people adapt online of, I'm going to be hardcore, inflexible, my way or the highway, I'm an asshole kind of mentality. Whereas that used to be just who you were online. Now we're starting to see this evolve into the way people are in the real world. Any of us who've been in customer service positions, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, have encountered this one time and time again. But it is something that pops up a lot. It's the way that this online mentality of selfishness has kind of dominated our discourse. Jay, I know you've run into this. I've seen the stuff you post in some of our Facebook groups. So I know you have some many customer service stories that orient around this sort of attitude. And it's a freaking joke the way some of these people act. But how do we deal with, and I ask this of you, and I know Courtney, you have some experience with this as well. Is there a way we can take a customer service mindset of dealing with these people and turn it into something righteous, or are we just going to have to deal with these assholes forever?
Prior to trying to go into that, functional disclosure here, I've got maybe 10 minutes until my computer dies. So
fair functional note as well. When your computer dies, I think we're just about ready to call it anyway. And I think we have enough material here for a two-parter again. And I'm very geeked about that.
Hopefully it'll at least die at a funny time again.
Yeah, because that was great the last time where it cut out perfectly. That is wonderful.
But let's continue.
Yeah.
Oh man, as far as trying to take a customer service approach, listening to people, but also setting boundaries so that they can get their point across, but know that you're not going to let them be an asshole to you. Give them options, look them in the eye if that's an option at all. Yeah, just listening to people, but setting boundaries.
That is one of the wisest things that could be said in that situation there. Setting boundaries, which is something, and it drives me nuts in Christianity in general, that we have kind of thrown out the window for the last multiple decades, is the idea that setting boundaries are a healthy thing. There's this belief in our faith practice that if you're doing it right, then you don't have boundaries. You're all Christ, all times, all the time, 100%, full force. And like, yeah, setting boundaries with people, setting boundaries in the way you handle yourself and being measured in that way. That's exactly what I was thinking there. I think that's exactly how things should be handled. What do you guys think? Do you guys agree with that? Do you have any other perspectives on how to handle this?
I think there's something to be said about knowing when to, we are entitled as a business to deny service. Specifically online, there's a point at which you don't have to engage anymore. Like, okay, no, here's your refund. Take your business elsewhere. Have a nice day. Go F yourself. I feel like that's a mental health boundary that I've had to learn to set for myself. It's actually why you won't see me on Facebook anywhere near as much anymore, because I've gotten to where I'm like, this is not something I look forward to. This is not something that's enriching my life or making me a better person or making really anyone else a better person. Like, yeah, I know like my mom and some friends are deeply entertained when I go off on somebody. Cool. But that's not, you got to know when to, from a customer service perspective. And I've worked a lot of jobs that won't let you do this, which is, I think, maybe similar to how I have spent a lot of years not letting myself just disengage. Like, someone is wrong on the internet, like that old comic. It's okay if someone is wrong on the internet. You're probably not going to change their mind. If you want to engage and you've got the time and energy for that, okay. But it's okay to deny service, to step away and say, okay, have a nice day. We're done with this conversation.
I have something to add because I am a customer service representative. I'm
sorry.
It's also for a federal agency.
I'm very sorry.
Yes, we are not allowed to deny. We are not allowed to deny service. And so, especially over this, whole last year and a half with the pandemic and people coming in without masks and all sorts of other things, I have heard a lot of political beliefs and a lot of religious beliefs and a lot of all sorts of other things. And I am not allowed to deny service to anyone. And I am supposed to basically grin and bear it the entire time. And I would love to call my manager or, the person above me. Unfortunately, that person, there's only one. And she was out filling the role that we were short staffed for. So it was just me in the office. And so when you get certain things and certain people spouting off hatred and just really mean things, not necessarily directed to you, but it feels directed to you because you like myself, like, yeah, if I have a customer who is going off about trans rights or intersex people or gay people or anything else like that, thank God I have a mask, because I have resting bitch face to begin with. And like, I am really pissed at that point. So I've got that barrier, but also I have that barrier so I don't have old men telling me that I need to smile more and all this other crap all day long. Like it actually like really helps. I don't think I'm ever going to get rid of my mask. I'm perfectly happy with this one. But yeah, when you're interacting with people on a daily basis and you have no choice, there's something to be said about the ability of being able to, once that customer walks away, telling the next customer, like, excuse me for a minute, I need to go grab something, and then walk into the back and just like do the face palm and collect yourself for a few minutes and then get back to it. But by the end of the day, and this has been my day every day for a year and a half, of being able to, at the end of the day, go, crap, that was a lot to deal with. A lot. Because
I'm gonna pause and say that in my personal belief, that the moment where you say to leave the room and facepalm for a second, that being when Courtney drops out, was just about as funny as it was the last time. So I'm gonna take that. That was perfect. I want to throw out there as a means of kind of bringing this somewhat to a close, is that you're absolutely right. I think both of you, that this customer service mentality is kind of a good way to look at it. In the interest of being marginally self-serving, I will say it's my belief that in a church/life environment, the role of a pastor is to effectively be like the manager, as you described it, to be the one who steps in when you're out of spoons and says, look, y'all, I got this. I'm our spoon manufactory for the day. I will handle the assholes for a minute. Will you go collect yourself? That should be the role of pastors and faith leadership in a church and life environment. And the fact that a lot of churches and church leadership aren't doing that is problematic. But I do think, that aside, you guys are right that our customer service experienced folks are the ones who should be front and center in determining how all social policy works from now on.
Well, I think everybody always wants to like think their opinion is valid and wants to have a discussion. Like even some of these people that Audra has to deal with, they just like to listen to themselves talk, and they want to convince themselves of their beliefs and then convince everyone of their beliefs. But I guess, is it the pastor's job then, or it can be anybody, to step in and say like, this opinion is not valid, like there's no place here?
Yeah. The drawing of those boundaries is nominally done on the individual level, but not all individuals are able, whether that's due to personal ability, social pressure, environmental conditions. And that is, I think, particularly where a pastor or a faith leader should be the one to step in and say, look, this person, for whatever reason, can't draw a boundary, but I'm perfectly happy to tell you how wrong you are. And step in and take the swing for them.
I was really excited to hear a quote the other day. I have no idea who it was from. I shared it on Facebook, and it was one of those like, that's a really good quote, I like that, but it was like anonymous at that point, and I didn't do a deep dive, which was that no, not everyone is entitled to their opinion. Everyone is entitled to their informed opinion. No one is entitled to be ignorant. And I liked that concept of it, is that, yeah, everyone is entitled to have an opinion as long as it is well informed. But you don't get to just create an opinion and spew off hate and spew off all sorts of nonsense and have your opinion just be just as valid as the person who did the research, the person who has lived it, the person who's being persecuted, the person who, your opinion, that does not affect you at all about something that does not affect you at all, is not the same as somebody who it actually affects.
And I think that that is something the church would do well to start employing within itself, is the belief that everyone ought to have an informed opinion rather than just what you happen to believe. I come back to this a couple of times. A while back, I preached a sermon that was called Useless, that talked about how C.S. Lewis viewed different understandings of what it means to be a Christian. He believed quite firmly that there were specific metrics by which one could understand whether someone is a Christian or not. And that if we take it in this objectively spiritual sense or subjectively spiritual sense, that it becomes a useless term that has no meaning. And I'm not going to summarize, I'm not going to go back through the whole sermon here and there. But when we talk about revisiting this in this context, making sure that we are approaching our faith life and our social life in a way that isn't useless in that way, in a way that says, no, we have a clear metric of what is and isn't true here. And we have to approach this in a way that isn't just, I believe this, but I know this and I understand this, and is not ignorant of the truth and the history and the context behind it. I think is important. And I think there's got to be a way to play that forward. And having said that, I want to also, by the way, give real props to Courtney for managing to make it back in. Welcome back. I really want to compliment you with twice in a row now having crapped out at a truly hilarious time.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah, your timing remains impeccable. I don't know how you do it.
I'm glad. I am here to entertain. Yeah. My lighting in here is flickering. I hate this fan, but yeah. I may be available for the end of this here. So I was like, yeah, I'll try plugging it in. Husband's downstairs on the computer. So
yay. Well, we're glad you made it back. But yeah, to close things out then, since we've been going at this for a good long while, we got enough material for a two-parter. I'm happy. I hope the rest of y'all are happy with us as much as we've rambled so far. In the future, I'd love to do more specific topical deep dives, but I think for now, starting out with just a conversation is a good place to start. In the meantime, to kind of close things out, I want to ask, is there anything else you guys wanted to touch on before we finished up?
I would like to maybe show the audience at some point, or whoever is listening, the deep kind of dive into we really did do like an introduction during this one, but maybe for each person that does not identify as heterosexual, like the worst moment that they've come up with like in their lifetime, and having to reconcile that, whether it be, somebody online I'm glad, Steve, that you brought up the online stuff, because I was going to bring that up too, that's now a part of our life daily, is this digital world. But those people overall don't matter, but they do attribute to your mental health all day, every day. And I run into issues where I've even messaged on saying, like, I'm having a hard day today. Like, this is rough. Like, I'm looking at something that I cannot like wrap my head around without feeling just like this, I need to rant.
Why people have a social media sabbatical now and then. Like everybody, so many people have done that on Unplug or whatever. Yeah.
Well, social media is designed to keep us looking at it, not to be good for our mental health. That's the problem.
Exactly. That is a problem, but it's also one of those things that I think we kind of always need to have on the back burner, as our community is not just what is our closest community. It's also everything outside of that. And we need to know how other people view us.
Yeah.
And
that's a theory on which this whole church thing has been founded. So yeah, definitely.
And so I think it would be nice to take an even deeper dive into that, and then have maybe even a broader base of people we talk to, including trans people, intersex people, and, really get an idea of what life has been like for that individual person. Because obviously no bi person is going to speak for all bi people. No gay person is going to speak for all gay people. Like, you know what I mean? Like that.
But those individual stories, they mean something.
they mean something. They're a part of who we are.
Mhm.
And they might help somebody else listening to this, especially if they are younger and have not come out yet,
Yeah. So
to hear that.
So let's consider this tag end of the conversation as a teaser for what will come next. If y'all are interested in getting in on this, I'd appreciate it. I would love to have all 4 of you guys back for that exact conversation. That is a wonderful idea, and I have openings as recent as 2 weeks from now. But we can schedule that once we're done recording. In the meantime. Let's definitely do that, because those stories are super important, and I think that's something that we should both honor and confront, if that makes any sense. From this perspective, we should honor what has happened, and from a Christian perspective, confront how terrible it was. So
If I can pop in, apologies, I can't believe I'm still hanging out of this thought with all the ADD. Just connecting 2 ideas that have been presented here, your personal story, the worst thing that you dealt with, and is what Steve was saying earlier about exposure therapy, and like in Jay's experience with his mom, how just being exposed, people who are different than you, how it can change. I actually have stories for myself from the other side of that sort of situation. Like, just minor preview, I used to be one of those people who didn't get the trans thing until like having trans people in my life and being like, oh my gosh, this person is so much healthier than I've ever seen them, and things like that. I feel like those sorts of the exposure therapy stories might be good to try and collect, just because exposure therapy is great, but not everybody knows like gay people who are going to admit they're gay to the person because they're a loon about it. I feel like the other people's exposure therapy stories might work as surrogate exposure therapy for people willing to read them, but who haven't had those experiences. Just random thought.
Yeah, no, that's
Yes,
an idea.
absolutely.
And I'm going to go ahead and say that any of you or anyone else who wants to put one of those out there in writing, we got a blog section on our website. I'm happy to put them up there. That said, I'm going to go ahead and bring today's episode to a close, if that's all right with you guys. And we are nothing if not awash in good ideas if we can keep rolling forward, which I absolutely love to see. But for now, I want to go ahead and say thank you to anybody who's made it to the end of these 2 videos. If you're still watching here through to the end, thanks for sticking around. We really appreciate it. This has been a really great conversation that looks like it's going to keep going on here a little bit later, and I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be a lot of fun. In the meantime, if you are part of a community, you already know that. If you don't, check out our website. We're a weird community. We do the online thing way more than the physical thing. In fact, most of our community is done through our Discord server. So if you haven't had a chance to jump on that, please go ahead and jump on that. Link to that is on the website, and the link to the website is in the description. You can check out some of the other stuff we put out. We have a Psalms from the Trails series that comes out every Thursday, which I'm still excited because this last week I finally actually got to go outside because the state of emergency ended here in Kobe, freaking finally. So that's a thing. Every week we also have a more regular scripture and sermon that's happening as well. You can check here for those as well. You guys have anything you want to plug or shout out to before we end it for today?
I do. I want to shout out, actually plug, because it has nothing to do with me. But at this, the end of this episode, I do want people to know, especially if you need help, trevorproject.org.
Yeah.
Please go to interact.org, which is a great resource for people with intersex. And PFLAG. Check out your local PFLAG area, which is Parents, Friends, Lesbians, and Gays. Open up your community, open up your resources, and get any help or understanding that you need or your friends and family need.
Yeah. And if all of those big resources seem a little too threatening to you or a little too intimidating, As you can see, our tiny community's got more than enough people with experience in these backgrounds as well. And if nothing else, you can reach out to me privately, and I'm happy to help you out in any way that I can as well. All of that information, again, will drop in the description here. All right, you guys got anything else? No?
Nope.
All right, then I want to thank you guys for joining us today, and thank everybody who's been watching us. So everybody, have a great week. We'll see you on the next episode. Take care.